I'd like to warmly welcome members of the press, and we'd like to express our gratitude to you for your patience. I'd like to welcome President Ader, Janos Ader, and the Minister of Water Resources of India. First of all, I'd like to ask the President of the Republic of Hungary to inform members of the press. Good morning, esteemed ladies and gentlemen. I can also say that older members of the press, or the luckier members of the press, are able to report for the third time about the Budapest Water Summit. The first one, 6 years ago, was titled "Give Future a Chance." The second one, 3 years ago, "Water Connects." This year, the title is "Preventing Water Crises." Something that we talked about 6 years ago as a threatening, looming future vision, by today has become a reality. So everything that we heard in the keynote speeches, some people called it by its name, some only alluded to it. The bottom message being that in many regions of the world, the water crisis has become reality. And the three dramas of water is unfolding in front of our eyes: polluted water, too much water, too little water, and the drama thereof. And it is no coincidence that I said in my speech that this drama is not a drama of water. It is a drama of humanity. This is about all of us. And this is why I'm so delighted that the Minister of Water Resources of India has accepted our invitation to not only speak as a keynote speaker, but to also attend this press conference and to perhaps give us a first-hand account. Because everything that he talked about in his speech and everything that we can hear about in the different studies, the different problems that India is struggling with and is facing, I think India and her story embodies all the three different dramas of water. His Excellency, the Minister, discussed that they stand for 18% of the world's population. 18% of all the world's cattle stock is found in India, while they only possess 4% of all the water resources in the world. This itself alludes and shows the kind of contradiction that the Indian government, Indian authorities, and the people of India have to be struggling with. And this contradiction is not only typical to India. I think the Indian numbers are testament to this double-faceted story. 16 part of the country is droughted, whereas 13% is constantly hit by floods. This, again, is a contradiction that could be said about not only about India, but several other countries of the world. I also alluded in my keynote speech to the fact that India is soon going to be the most populous country in the world. And all the measures that His Excellency has been talking about, the plans that the Indian government wishes to implement in the next coming years, are not only important for India, but for all of us on Earth. Because if India is a successful country, and if India becomes successful in this endeavor, this will not only set the example, this will not only give hope, this will not only give encouragement for other countries, but this is going to serve as a model that countries experiencing the same problems, finding themselves in the same situation, can also use. His Excellency the Minister talked about the importance of water management. We have a similar program. Mr. Minister, we call it the Clean Tisza. The Tisza is the second largest river in Hungary. You talked about the clean Ganges river. We have heard about the pollution on the river, and we know that you have set this as a target to actually purify this water. So if everything that you heard today, and may I also allude to the speech of the Cambodian Prime Minister. He said in his speech, when we talk about water, and when Cambodia is basically ensuring the important role of the country in the future. He can only think of water as the white gold. Water is the white gold. It speaks 1,000 tales. It characterizes the problem so well. We like to say that 20th century is the century of the oil and 21st is the century of water. But I think the notion of white gold already perhaps carries a message of the value that it has, water has. And if we look at all the keynote speeches, and if we were to try and summarize them in one, or let's say two sentences, then I can say, well, and that is the title of the whole conference, prevent the water crisis where it's possible, adapt to the water crisis where the water crisis has already set in, and the question is, the second part of the sentence, the greatest dilemma that every single country has to overcome, especially countries of the developing world, especially those having a fast-growing population, less and less agricultural land, less and less water. What do we do to feed more and more people with appropriate amount of food, appropriate quality of water? And the key question here is good quality, good quantity water. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Mr. President. And now I ask His Excellency, the Minister of India, to deliver his speech.
Thank you very much, His Excellency, President of Hungary, Mr. Janos Ader, and the friends from the media. As rightly said by the President of Hungary, that India being a big country, a large country, and having diverse climatic reasons, we are facing all three challenges which have been narrated in today's conference and opening session. The three dramas, the most polluted water, too much water, and too little water. I think India is among the only country in the whole of the world, or a few, who is dealing with all three type of challenges, and having the second largest population, our challenge is grave. And as whole of the world is visualizing the impact, deep impacts of climate change, the threat is more grave. And as I have discussed and I have deliberated in my speech, that now all of us will have to come together, the governments, the technology providers, the scientific fraternity, the business fraternity, NGOs, and everybody who is dealing in the field of water will have to come together, dream together, to work together, and to join hands to fight this, to combat this serious threat to the planet, serious threat to our serious global issue, the preventing water crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will have time for a few questions. Thank you very much, Balázs Nárai from Kossuth National Radio. The question to both of the dignitaries, a more comprehensive question. Every panel begins here with a question at this water summit, and it's related to different kinds of issues related to water. How do you, Excellency, see this? What is the task? Is the technology given? So all we need to do is introduce the new technology. If this is the case, what is politics' task? Or do we still have to come up first with the technologies in order to manage the three dramas of water? First, the President. Are technologies available to resolve the problems that we're talking about? In the majority of the cases, yes, these technologies are available. So, and that is why I tried in my speech also to discuss all the three scenarios: too much water, too little water, polluted water, and I tried to come up with Hungarian examples. I specifically did not want to come up with examples of affluent countries or countries that have a high GDP who find it relatively easy to adapt to a new situation. Some of these solutions need time to be implemented. The Cambodian minister talked about building dikes, reservoirs, heightening the walls of these, flood defenses. All these are time-consuming work. You just cannot do them from one year to the other. But as a Chinese popular wisdom says, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. So if you never start this, if you put this off, you're going to just have further and further disasters. And there are very simple economic calculations which show that the amount of money spent on prevention will bear fruit several times over. So we can build reservoirs, we can build embankments, we can build dikes, extraordinary reservoirs, emergency reservoirs. We know the technology for that. And of course, the images that you've all seen in the past days, just remember Spain or even Japan. These show that our infrastructure is just not prepared for some of the extremes. The infrastructure is not able to actually withstand this recurring, more and more frequently recurring extreme weather disaster situations. But the technology is there. For too little water, of course, we're talking about irrigation technologies that could be developed. There's one single problem that I alluded to, and I'll be happy to repeat this over and over again, because when I first found out about this Hungarian innovation, it was just, in a way, unimaginable. This is a special gel that they spread on the land, and this gel actually allows rainwater through, but does not allow humidity or slows down the evaporation of humidity from the soil. And it improves soil water retention capability by 40 to 50% in a way that this gel decomposes and actually improves soil quality. So one does not have to be very well read on agricultural science to understand precisely where. Basically, let's say a plant, it could be corn or whatever, the survival of a plant depends on 1 or 2 weeks of water. 40–50% of water that remains in the soil works to preserve crop. And this is why the exhibition is so good. You can go and see this and other solutions there. And just as in India, the key question is going to be the following: 4% of Earth's water, how will they make good use of it? What will they do with wastewater to purify it, recycle it, into grey water, for example, for domestic use? If you remember, I cited the example of Singapore. They are purifying, cleaning wastewater so much that they are able to recycle it without any further purification into the tap water system. I have been there, done that, tasted this water, and I'm here to speak about it. I've survived. So, cleaning wastewater, the problem of too much water, and especially the too little water, drought situations. Yes, indeed, technologies are there. I could go on at length. City of Martonvásár in Hungary, where plant modification is taking place to actually bring new crops, new breeds of crops that are drought resistant, because we have to prepare for declining amount of precipitation. Does it require a political decision? Yes, it requires a political decision. We need to reappropriate community funds. No wonder in India there is a separate ministry for this issue. And I'm sure, without having spoken in detail with the minister, I'm sure that they had to transform their budget. They have to appropriate extra funds because the reservoirs will not be built by themselves. They are costing billions in Hungary. Dikes will not be heightened by themselves. It's going to take a lot of taxpayer money in this country as well and elsewhere. But whatever we manage to prevent will actually far exceed the amount of the damage that we'll prevent. It's going to be the damage could be much higher. It's possible that the emergency reservoirs we've built will be used only every 10 years. But what if we didn't have them? Imagine all the major cities along the rivers. If they're all inundated, can you imagine the damage? Third issue, related to your question, financing. And it's quite just. I think your questions are justifiable. Today, annually, in the world, there's about 200 billion US dollars built on water infrastructure development. According to expert calculations, we would need 3 times this amount, $600 billion a year, in order to remedy the problems we're talking about and to prepare on the long term for averting these disasters. Is there a possibility? Is there a way to do this? In the afternoon, we will have a meeting with visiting development bank leaders that are here for the summit. There's one thing that I'd like to call your attention to. The aggregate GDP of the world, if I remember, is $88,000 billion. $88,000 billion. If only 0.5% of this, 0.5% of all GDP on Earth would be spent on water management, we would have the missing amount. It's not that easy. As easy I found it to actually utter this sentence, but it's not hopeless. It's not hopeless. Economists, famous economists, even the economic Nobel laureate Nordhaus or Lord Stern have quite clearly shown economic calculations that every single dollar invested will bring returns several times over if it's for prevention. It's much easier to prevent than to avert. Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Minister.
Very much. I do agree with the statement made by Honorable President of Hungary. But in addition to that, I wish to tell one thing, that whichever the country in the world have successfully managed their water resources, I must cite the example of Israel here, which is having only 100 millimeters average rainfall in a year, and a country with abundant water resources and water exporting nations they have become as. And whereas in other end, a country like India, which is having 1,068 millimeters of water, and because of improper management, we are a water scarce country. This is what. And if I say that how the Israel or all other countries, if you just look into, have become the water abundant countries, there are 4 principles which broadly His Excellency Janos Ader was telling about. Number 1, the harvesting of water, the water which is coming through precipitation. If I say about India, we are having almost 4,000 billion cubic meters of water we get out of the rainfall and the snowfall annually. And the total water bearing capacity over the earth in our country is only 250 billion cubic meters. So there's a huge gap. So to conserve water is the first requirement. The second requirement is the judicious use of water. As we all know about that, the 89% of the total water, as if I speak about India, 89% of the total water being consumed is consumed in agriculture. So judicious use of the water, as President Janos Ader was telling that 0.5% of the total investment of the total agriculture GDP is made in agriculture. I look at it in different manner. I say if only 5% of the total water which is being used into agriculture is saved through increasing water use efficacy, a country like India can survive more 30, 40 or 50 more years as far as the drinking water is concerned. So judicious use of water, whether it is in industry or it is in the agriculture, or if the water being used in domestic for the drinking water purpose and other purposes. The third thing, which is the reuse and recycle of water, as we all are aware, we will have to increase. Because ideally, what should happen? The treated water should go through canals to the agriculture fields for agriculture, to the farmlands for agriculture, and the fresh water should flow in the rivers. whereas in the whole of the world, the situation is different. The treated water is being, the untreated or treated water is being disposed into the rivers, and the fresh waters are taken out of from the rivers for agriculture. The third thing, which you have asked, the use of technology to reduce the unaccounted water which is being leaked through the pipelines, or technology for increasing water use efficacy. And the last but not least, that is the people's participation. Water will have to become everybody's business. And if I say there are 4 P's are required. First is political commitment. The second is public investment. The third P is partnerships. Partnership for sharing technologies, partnership for increasing water use efficacies, partnerships for better management of water. And the last, again I'll say, which is the most important, that is people's participation. Water will have to become a people's subject, people's voice. Then and then only we can save this a planet with the crisis which we are seeing. Thank you.
Köszönöm szépen. Még egy kérdés.
One more question. Microphone for the gentleman. Népszava István Ramnit, 3 problems in Hungary that I'd like to ask your opinion about, Mr. President. You both mentioned state public contribution, the necessity of public contribution. In Hungary, according to the profession, 1,500, 3,000 billion Hungarian foreign investment are missing, $10 billion. Mr. President, how do you think we can resolve this problem? Only to resolve the water infrastructure. Do you think we could apply this idea of using 0.5% of the GDP, well, to improve the Hungarian water network? The other problem is to do with the Paks nuclear plant, which last summer, because of the low levels of water in the river Danube, was experiencing operational problems. How can we actually manage this, especially in light of the fact that Hungary is planning to build new reactors, which are larger than the present reactor? And the third question related is that by 2030 there is the idea to have a carbon neutral economy in Hungary. Mr. President, you said that Hungary is committed to becoming carbon neutral by 2030. Meanwhile, the Hungarian government has not reiterated this. How do you see this? Or do you think there is a potential to amend Hungarian legislation? Thank you. I think the question was definitely not directed to the minister. I'd love to pass the question, the answer to you. God knows, you might have a good idea about how to renovate the Hungarian infrastructure. Well, the description is clear. Indeed, the Hungarian pipeline system is obsolete and requires modernization, and the amounts of money are correct. Sooner or later, this is something they will have to start doing. I have been supportive of this for a long time, and I agree with the experts who have been formulating their opinions so far. Your colleague sitting next to you, he asked, is there any technology? Yes, indeed. In Hungary, there is quite a substantial network loss, and today we can actually manage without actually having to dig. We can renovate some of the pipelines with a new plastic technology. So therefore, we are causing perhaps less disruption. In a one way, of course, to renovate, to modernize the pipelines, to make them accident-free, and to reduce network losses. So the technology is given. Yes, indeed, you're right. It is budgetary funds that are required for this. I can just reiterate, as I've been fighting for this, I will continue to lobby for this. Second question was the Paks nuclear plant. Let us quickly add, perhaps those who have not been following last year's developments, the fact that the Paks nuclear plant had to reduce its operation for a few days. On every other day of the year, operation was hassle-free. For the new blocks that they are building, I have been informed by experts working on the program that they are envisaging that this record low on the water level can occur. Therefore, they are taking this into consideration when designing the whole cooling structure of the nuclear plant's new reactors. I've said my opinion many times about the nuclear plant. I said, if you say A, you have to say B. So if you find it important to not fuel and heat the planet, if you want to reduce CO2 in the atmosphere, and if you want to do this as fast as possible, I am supportive of all this. But at the same time, if we do not want to give up on our standards of living, if we, at the same time, do not want industry to not have access to the appropriate amount of electricity, if at the same time we still do not want to make Hungary even more exposed because we are already importing electricity, then we need core plants. And it can be only three kinds. Fossil fuel, well, if we said yes to the first question, then it's out of the question. Hydro plants, more and more risky. Look at the dried up reservoirs. And the third option is nuclear. So if you say A, I say you say B. So Paks, yes, but for Paks, there's only three questions that are important. Security, security, and security. And then comes everything else. And your third question, this is about Hungary becoming carbon neutral by 2030. I've said this on several occasions. Precisely, I said that by 2030, we will no longer produce energy from coal. Coal will be phased out. We will not be generating electricity from coal. You know precisely that this actually means one single power plant in Hungary. So what do? Do we bet and see if in 2030 you're right or I'm right? You see, so be patient. 2030 is not around the corner. We have, 11 years to go. So I can only tell you, I wager quite a lot of money to say that what I'm saying is going to happen. Thank you very much for your attention. Mr. President, thank you very much. Mr. Minister, you've been inspired by the words, you've been making notes. Would you like to add to anything that was said?
I was just supposed to tell, I was writing that the problem which you gentlemen have said, it's not only government's business. We have to make the society more climate responsible. And that the society's participation can only combat and help us to combat this climate change threat which is coming out. And the second thing is, all the governments, we say more or less each and every government in this whole of the world is doing its best as far as the water is concerned in their capacities. If I say about India, I just wish to tell you about the success which we have attained. In 2014, when our Prime Minister announced from the ramparts of Red Fort while addressing for the first time after becoming Prime Minister of India, when he said that, can we offer a present to our father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhiji, on his 150th birthday by making our country open defecation free. At that time, whole of the world and our country also, people were not knowing that our country is having, the people of our country, only 39% of the people of our country is having access to the toilets or having toilets in their home. And if I say 39%, then I think the magnanimity, you people sitting here in Hungary, you cannot understand. 600 million people were not having toilets in their home. I would criticize. People said that where is the public money, where is the investment, how, from where the investment will come. But since the investment came, and it became a people's movement, we have successfully done it. Now, India is 100% open defecation free. And on the similar lines, sitting on the shoulders of the success in these things, we have decided and taken a goal to provide drinking water to every household, which is at the moment is only 18% to the rural population. And that is backed by $51 billion investment. So it is what I have said in my previous, while answering the previous question, that people's participation is important, but public investment is also simultaneously important. So I think when it becomes everybody's business, everyone's business, we can get out of this situation. Thank you.
Köszönöm szépen, elnök miniszter úr.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, Mr. President. Wish you all good work.